join me today at the wheel of an incredible survivor, a virtually no miles Honda Civic, a 6th generation 1.5 5-door liftback. This is a car you virtually never see. Hello, welcome to Furious Driving, and today I'm stood next to a 1998 Rover 400, oh wait a minute, no, Honda. It's a Honda Civic. This is not a Rover 400, this is closely related in a weird kind of way to the Rover 400. This is a 1998 6th generation Honda Civic 1.5 VTEC 2 1.5i. Being a 6th generation Civic, this means this is part of the EK Honda family. These codes are massively confusing if you're not in the Honda fraternity. Another thing which is also kind of weird to work out is the precise relationship between this and the Rover 400, because most conversations about Hondas, Civics in particular, and Concertos from the 90s, and indeed Rover 200s and 400s, seem to begin with the phrase, or involve the phrase, that's related to the Honda/Rover. Now it is kind of related because the Civic begat the Concerto, begat the Domini, which also was involved in the production of the 400, which became the 45. Now the 45 didn't come from the Concerto because the Concerto became the Domini and the Domini became the 45, which came from Japan but was designed with British input in Japan from British people over... yeah, it's all in there somewhere. The Honda Civic had been around since 1972, and in that time 5 previous generations had passed, which is like light speed in car generations if you're used to things from maybe the BL stable. So by the time the 6th generation rolled around, it had evolved quite significantly. The original 1972 Mark I would have started about here and finished about here. It was tiny, but it had been gradual evolutions throughout the years. It had started off small as a tiny 5-door, grown bigger and bigger, and by the time the 5th generation came about, it didn't look massively different. In fact, it was basically the same platform, but a little bit smoother, a little bit rounder, a bit more squinty at the front without the grille. So by the time Madagasu Udigawa and Yoshi Udigoshi came to design this car, they got a fairly full palette of history to draw on, but still pushing the brand forward. And in this case, it does look certainly a bit more Roverized with these creases down the side, certainly the same door handles as you'll find in a 400, possibly 45, and various other little styling details which follow on from the Rover. And of course, at the front, from the 5th generation to the 6th generation, we've got much bigger squarer headlights. We've now got a grille, whereas before it was just a slot below the bonnet. And generally it's just squared off and added a bit more interest to the car again. Now the Civic was of course built for pretty much every conceivable market segment of its size category in virtually every country of the world. So there were body styles for every possibility: 3 doors, 2 doors, 4-door saloons, estates, and this one, the 5-door liftback, which looks like a saloon. And of course, being a Japanese car, we can't get into the boot without the key or the tag by the front door. I'm going to go pull that now. If you're used to Hondas and Rovers from this period, you'll be very well used to the fact that you can only do that, unless it's a convertible, in which case they take that thing away, and if you lose the key or break that lock, you're in trouble. Now, the boot is a bit of a cavern. It's not a massive car on the outside, but it's very practical on the inside. The boot area is pretty huge. If you're transporting Lego packs from the sub £10 range, let's say the 10 to 12 pound range of Lego from the Lego store, that kind of size, I think you're going to get around 174 of them in here. It's pretty cavernous. The floor is nice and flat, but it's not very deep, but you can stack things quite wide. The tail lamps do intrude a little, but not too much, but like on the Rovers, you've got quite a big lip to lift things over. Fortunately, the Lego boxes are very small, so you can carry a couple at a time. Fortunately, this does lift up and give you a huge opening. On the right hand side, we've got some random straps for tying things down, I guess. And on the left hand side, we've got a Honda branded 6-disc changer. Look, it's even got Honda branding on the CD caddy. Under the carpet, because it's a car of the 90s, we've got a bit of hardboard with a tiny bit of foam and a proper full-size steel wheel. Fantastic. This is one of the things I love about 90s cars. If you get a puncture, you can fix it and carry on. Also in the boot, got 2 speakers here, one either side. And that's basically it, sorry, nothing else. Oh, and we've got a pull-down handle as well, which is always good. Now this car has only got 22,000 miles on it, which is absolutely like new, so when I lift the bonnet, I'm expecting good things. Wow, this is Not pristine, but it is incredibly original under here. This is the 1.5 four-cylinder VTEC Yo 2, complete with, well, not much to be honest. It's a fairly basic car. It does have power steering, and I think that's your lot. I don't believe there's air conditioning on this car even. So this little four-cylinder is a brilliant, typically Honda, utterly bomb-proof, reliable thing. It's good for 112 horsepower and 134 newton meters of torque, which means it's got a 0 to 60 about 11.5 seconds and a top speed of 124. There's not really a lot else to say under here. It's just a nice little, very original engine. Right, let's take a look inside the car. It's just started raining, so it's a perfect time for that. This car actually belongs to a YouTuber called Amber from the channel Driven 24/7. And she bought the car because it was one old lady owner who'd had the thing from new, bought it from a Honda dealership, serviced it at the same Honda dealership, and towards the end, it's only been driven once a year to get serviced and MOT at the Honda dealership. And if you can see that mileage, that's slightly more than I thought, 23,474. That is all this car has ever done. It is like new in here. So we've got the fabric seats. They're not exactly velour-y. It's a kind of a harder tweedy zigzag, I don't know, Art Deco meets 80s neon pattern going on just there in the centre, with some velour-y stuff around the edge, which really hasn't worn at all. We've got a couple of manual adjustments, and of course down here we've got the same as every other Honda / Rover in this decade's fuel and boot release. Now let's climb in and get out the rain. Door shuts with a nice positive thump. It's a little bit clangy and echoey, but this is exactly the same as every other Honda and a lot of the Rovers that are based on it. Now let's start off with this door. This is kind of where you see Rover's influences come in by adding a bit of sculpture to the interior. We've got this lovely velour inner panel surrounded by the harder elephant hide, and in the middle of that, nestled in the middle of that, we've got this nice chrome solid cast metal door pull, which is never going to break, and a huge solid door pull, so you're not going to get that coming apart in your hand. Then we have the very Japanese window switches. They're great quality, but they just don't look fantastic, and we'll find the same thing with these mirror adjustment and light adjustment things over here as well, which again you'll find in Rover R8s and then the HHRs as well later on. Sometimes they hide them where you can't see them, sometimes they put them where you can. Down below we've got a really handy little cubby hole down by your right knee, the pistol pocket or something, I always forget the name of that. And this car, for some random reason, the SI spec has got a bit of timber. We've got fake wood, fake walnut veneer around the air vents on the right hand side, and then a strip right across the front. This is definitely borrowed from the Rover parts bin of odds and sods that they could slap into the front of this to make it a bit more upper class. Now you do find with these kind of cars, it is very much a sea of black plastic where the only touches of colour are things like this insert and then the mad fabrics that they go and chuck in the middle of the seat. This really is from an episode of Top of the Pops circa 1988. It's fantastic. Now, what have we got here? Let's look in the dashboard. First of all, we have got just 4 dials. Water temperature, fuel gauge on the outside. Interesting, the fuel gauge is permanently on. That's an unusual thing to see. Rev counter going to 8,000 RPM and the speedo to 140, which we already know is optimistic. These are the same speedo and rev counter dials you find in the Rover R8s, and you know I'm a big fan of them. They are massively clear. They are massive in their own right, actually, but they're so clear to read. They're really legible. Big fan of those. The font is quite fine, so it's interesting how easy it is to read. Then you have these buttons, which are again borrowed or shared with the Rovers. I think this is the later style. You don't find in the older cars they had little individual square buttons. The later 45s, I think, in the later 400s perhaps, had these more lozengey rounded off ones. Now the steering wheel. This is a leather rim with a rubbery plastic thing, and you'll notice it says SRS airbag because driver airbag was essential mandated kits by then. And we have the horns. Let's do a horn test. Oh, it's noddy. That's not a powerful horn. It's kind of suitable for the look of the car though, so we've done our horn test there. Now we have the stalks. These are another venerable item which go back all the way to, I don't know, a good decade before this, I would say. These indicator light stalks and the the wiper stalks on the other side. These are in every Honda, every Rover for years and years and years, but they are really good. They're nice to use, they're good tactile things, and they don't break. They're just brilliant. Now in the centre we've got a Rover thing going on, which is the choice of air flowed from cold outside or from heated from the ventilation system, which is a real Rover thing, which goes back to the 50s and 60s, and then gradually phased out towards the millennium, which is a shame. It's a nice thing to have, actually. It's a real kind of refreshing thing. Below that we've got a couple of more Rovery buttons, heated rear screen, hazard warning lights, and a little LCD clock. Oh. Now we have the original Honda radio cassettes. We've got the cassette player head unit, singled in, so it's kind of cool that this car belonged to a little old lady who didn't change this out. She kept with the original rather than swapping anything. But then why would you? You've got the cassette player that plays your tapes, you've got the 6-disc changer in the boot, everything you want, it's all there. Underneath that we've got these ventilation controls, which, as I've sort of probably mentioned before, are in all the Rover R8, all the 200s, 400s, etc., and all the Civics and Concertos. Underneath that, you see she didn't spec many options because we've only got one thing for recirculate the air. Everything else is blanking plates, so you could have had, I guess, air conditioning and who knows what else. Oil slick, ejector seat, you name it. We've got a big sweetie wrapper hole, 12 volts for your sat nav, and a huge cubby down there, all sort of waiting to be filled with toys and bits and pieces. Now we've got gearbox, then we've got a manual handbrake, and then we have another window switch. Now you may have noticed that there is only one window switch here on the driver's door. So instead of being driver's auto window, boring switch for the passenger with not auto, they put it over here by the handbrake, which is kind of a clever cost-saving manoeuvre because there's no window switch over on the passenger door arm. So they've doubled up using one switch in place of two. That's quite clever. Up here on the dashboard, the T-shelf area, we've got a large vent so we can defrost our windows nice and easily. And then we have this area here, which looks like it could be an area for T-shelfery, but it's not, for two important reasons. First of all, it's not tall enough, so you can't get your cup underneath the glass. And secondly, that is an airbag. That's a passenger airbag, and it's bizarre the way they've just taken the dashboard, cut a massive hole in the middle of it, and then slapped an airbag in with a random bit of old plank on top of it and called it done. You can tell this is probably done by the Rover department rather than the Honda department. Now above us we have got a very generous interior courtesy lamp, and we've got a big old switch for the electric sunroof. How cool is that? This is another Honda Rover thing. You might get manual windows, but you always get an electric sunroof if you have a sunroof fitted. Now looking in the back of the car, we've got virtually the same doors with this lovely velour-y stuff and the nice metal door handles. We do of course have the keep fit windows here in the back, and we have the same top of the pops set prop fabric for the seats, 3 seat belts and 2 headrests, so we are properly loaded with stuff, but no seat back storage, you'll notice. And one more funny interesting thing we notice here in the back of the car, we have got a third high level brake light, which is up in the window, so it's a little bit of an obscuration in the back of your rear view. However, when you come to look at it from the outside, it's not bonded, it's actually bolted through the glass. So that's an interesting thing to be cobbling together. I should make a note here of this sticker in the back window as well. This is the selling dealership that provided this car back in 1998, and it does still have those original number plates on it as well, which is fantastic. So heading out onto the open road in the Honda Civic 1.5 SI VTEC 2. No, sorry, not an SI, just an I. Now typically with the VTECs there's not a lot of grunt low down. You do have to give it a little bit of oomph to kick the engine in, so it will bog a little bit if you're not being, not brutal exactly, but a bit enthusiastic with the pedal. Now these cars were fantastic. They were the culmination of a joint effort between Rover and Honda, two great engineering companies. And they both brought different things to the table. Honda had incredible work ethic, incredible technical accuracy, and demands of their detail level being so high. Rover had incredible creativity, some of the most inventive engineers in the world really, and the two came together And so you could have that incredibly inventive, creative engineering making brilliant handling cars, but then screwed together with that awesome Honda quality level. And it cut both ways, so both the Rover R8s, 400s, 200s were very high quality Rovers, and the Hondas kept the Honda quality but gained a bit more drivability. Now we're cruising down this B road, and the ride is just sublime. It's lovely. It just floats almost like a French car with a bit of attitude. It's nice and soft over the bumps and things, but it absolutely hugs the bends as well. Now, I'd say this does feel an awful lot like the PG1 gearbox. I will have to double check whether or not this is what this car has got installed in it. The 5-speed was standard in pretty much everywhere in the world. There was a 4-speed auto as an option. Personally, I think the 5-speed manual is the way to go in these kind of cars. Now it's interesting, this is a 5-door hatch. It's the most practical version apart from the Estate, really. But it's a car you just don't really see anymore at all. Mostly you see 3 doors, and even then they have been modified to death. Never mind the VTEC Yo, they are stanced bro as well. And I'm not saying that's a bad thing, but it's nice to see one that's completely stock original form for a change. Now the owner, Amber, did mention that the Econo light does start popping up on the dashboard quite frequently, and indeed it has. I guess because I was driving carefully just then. And this car was built in almost every country of the world. It's virtually easier to say where it wasn't built than where it actually was. This car, for the UK and European market, was built in Swindon here in the UK. Secondly, they were built in Suzuka in Japan. Then for the American market, they were built in Ohio. They were also built in Canada, Thailand, Taiwan, Indonesia, Turkey, the Philippines, where else was there? And there were factories in Pakistan, Brazil, New Zealand and Venezuela. There's a few more. It was built in China, but it wasn't known as a Civic in China. It was called the Yancheng YC7150. And in South Africa, where they built it, it was actually known as the Honda Ballard. Oh, these do handle nicely. It looks so unassuming, but they just grip and they barely roll. They feel so composed. Such great cars. This is why I'm such a big fan of the Rover R8 Series 200s and 400s. I think they're really good cars that are just overlooked, or have been for a long time anyway. The pedals are nicely spaced, they're nicely weighted as well. They're not too light. Got just a nice bit of weight in them. The steering's got plenty of feedback in it. Got a nice big glass area. You've got a low front scuttle, which is a Honda design trait, which is carried over into the Rovers as well. So you've got a really good clear view down your bonnet, a nice easy view of all your corners, so you can manoeuvre the car and position it on the road really well. The A post is not too thick, the B post is behind you. It's fantastic. The only real thing that lets it down is the brakes. They are not special on these cars, and they never were. This particular model, this trim level, wasn't the most basic. It was kind of a weird mid-level with a bit of luxury stuff like the wood in the CD player, but at the same time it wasn't overflowing with goodies either. Hence the fact we've still got wind-up back windows, the steel wheels with hubcaps. This car is just so much fun to drive. It looks like nothing, but it goes like everything. It doesn't even have to be very fast, it's just the way you can enjoy the road at not insane speeds, and the car will grip through really tight corners, fill you with confidence, and then deliver on that confidence. It's not misplaced. It's front wheel drive, so it pulls you up the bends easily.
Hi, my name's Amber, and today I'm kindly joined by Matt from Furious Driving, who is appreciating my Honda just like I appreciate it. Just wanted to take a couple of minutes just to tell you the little love story of how I got hold of this car. So a good few years ago, I worked in a motor trade as a driver, and that particular morning I had to go and collect this car for its annual service. Cut a long story short, I was greeted by a lovely, well-presented elderly lady. She opened up the garage and here was the Honda. So the car only got used when it went out for its service every year, so it barely covered any mileage. In between those yearly services, the car just sat in the garage, so hence the 23,000 miles on the clock. I left the job, and years later I was saying to my boyfriend, we're driving down the road, and I said to him, somewhere along here there's a little Honda that I fell in love with. I wonder if the Honda's still going, I wonder if it's rotten away. Anyway, the next evening I was looking for cars to buy, like a petrol head you do, always look for cars to buy that you don't actually need, and yeah, along came the Honda, and I thought, that is that Honda that I fell in love with 2-3 years ago. I had to have it. I contacted the guy and I said, look, please make me the first person to look at this car. I had to have that car, and here we are today, and she's a pleasure to drive. I also own an Abarth, which is fast, sporty and fun. This is a bit more refined, but yeah, I love her. She's a retro modern classic, and a big thanks to Matt for coming to film her today. Thank you.
Well, thank you for joining me today here at the wheel of this quite fantastic Honda Civic. It's an I hate saying time warp, but this is one of those cars that really does fall into that category. If you like this, please do hit like, subscribe, share with your friends, hit the bell notification to see what's coming up next time, and join me again soon when I'll be driving something completely different.